On the streets of Hong Kong on Sunday, protesters could be heard chanting new demands, echoing a shift in anger over a proposed extradition law to how the government has responded. Carrie Lam step down, withdraw the bill, we are not rioters, release the arrested students, Despite a government concession on Saturday to postpone voting on a contentious bill that would allow for individuals arrested in Hong Kong to be tried in mainland China, tens of thousands of people took to the streets for the third time in a week. Far from placating the protesters, the postponement energized them and they expanded their list of grievances. Among other things, demonstrators urged Carrie Lam, the CITIA's chief executive, to step down, condemned the police for the use of violent tactics, demanded that arrested demonstrators be released, and called on the government to cease referring to the protests as riots, which could have serious legal ramifications for those who have been detained. Many people on Sunday carried photos of bloodied demonstrators or images of the police deploying pepper spray and signs that read Donna T. Kill Us. Protesters said they also wanted to increase the pressure on Ms. Lam to withdraw the bill entirely. The extradition legislation that prompted the outrage would allow criminal suspects in Hong Kong, a semi-autonomous Chinese territory, to be transferred for trial to mainland China, where the courts are controlled by the Communist Party. We Donna T. trust her at all, actually, Phoebe Ng, 29, a demonstrator, said of Ms. Lam, whom many protesters have called on to resign. A similar protest last Sunday drew more than 1 million people, organizers said, making it one of the largest demonstrations in the history of Hong Kong, a city of about 7 million. On Wednesday, lawmakers were forced to postpone a scheduled debate when tens of thousands of protesters gathered outside the legislature. Some protesters who tried unsuccessfully to storm the building were met with tear gas, pepper spray, and rubber bullets from riot police officers. Protesters were further galvanized on Sunday by the death of a man who the police say fell from a building after unfurling a protest banner that read, "No extradition to China." The man, whom the police identified as a 35-year-old with the surname Leung, had been perched for hours on the roof of an upscale mall near the Hong Kong government complex, where the protests have been concentrated. Shortly after 9 p.m., he climbed onto scaffolding on the side of the building as firefighters tried to rescue him, landing next to an inflatable air cushion that had been set up to catch him. He was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. The man had been wearing a yellow raincoat, on which slogans criticizing the police and Carrie Lam, Hong Kong's chief executive, were written. Many of the protesters on Sunday carried white flowers as a sign of mourning. His sacrifice really does show that the government is still ignoring how the citizens, how the students feel, said Anson Law, 17, a high school student who has participated in the protests. The people want to show their will. On Sunday afternoon, protesters outside the mall lined up to pay their respects at a makeshift memorial of incense, flowers, and handwritten notes. A death of one man, death of Hong Kong, said one. A vigil is planned for 9 p.m. At least 40 people joined a small counter-protest outside the United States consulate on Sunday, echoing the Communist Party line that the anti-extradition protests in Hong Kong had been engineered by foreign governments hostile to China. The Chinese Foreign Ministry and members of the Hong Kong administration aligned with Beijing have repeatedly said the protests are part of a foreign influence campaign, pointing to recent statements made by Western leaders in support of the demonstrators, as well as earlier meetings between Hong Kong democracy advocates and American politicians. The riots, I believe, were instigated by foreign forces, and it is sad that the young people of Hong Kong have been manipulated into taking part, said Joseph Yam, a member of the Executive Council, the territorial's top advisory body. A spokesman for China's foreign ministry blamed Western governments and leaders on Friday, 2 days after protesters clashed with police officers outside the Hong Kong legislature. Some Western politicians openly prop up those who are anti-China and seek to destabilize Hong Kong, said Gang Shuang, the ministry spokesman. Some countries saw consulates general in Hong Kong engaged in aiding and abetting with wrong statements in disregard of international law and basic norms governing international relations. These facts are crystal clear. Stanley Ng, chairman of the Hong Kong Federation of Trade Unions and one of the counter-protesters outside the United States consulate on Sunday, described the anti-extradition protesters as rioters. We, as parents, are very worried that our children will continue to be dragged into the team of rioters to take part in the riots, he said. Woe's the next Joshua Wong? There may not be one. Many have compared this week's demonstrations and civil disobedience to the umbrella movement of 2014, when protesters led by Mr. Wong, who was then a teenager, occupied major commercial districts for almost 3 months to demand a greater voice in Hong Kong's affairs. But this time, the protesters do not appear to have a clear leader. Demonstrations by an overwhelmingly young crowd on Wednesday were organized largely through social media, word of mouth and secure messaging apps like Telegram. As of Sunday morning, no single organizer had emerged as the students' leader. That may be because Mr. Wong and other leaders of the umbrella movement were jailed for their roles in the 2014 demonstrations. Wo's going to be quite so willing, openly, to take 6 years of jail as the prize for the protests, said Claudia Mo, a pro-democracy Hong Kong lawmaker. Andrew Junker, a sociologist at the Chinese University of Hong Kong who has studied the umbrella movement, said one challenge for protesters without a leader is knowing when to declare victory. It's the weakness of being so decentralized and leaderless and egalitarian and spontaneous, he said. Students have drawn other lessons from the 2014 demonstrations, making them much better prepared this time, said Leung Yuting, student union president at Hong Kong Education University. Factions that differed over strategy in the past have stopped attacking each other and learned to cooperate, he said. We are all finding our own ways to resist the government, Mr. Leung said. All our lives are at stake, so this is a sign that the Hong Kong people can stand together to fight something that is not right. In a remarkable reversal, Hong Kong's chief executive, Carrie Lam, said on Saturday that she would indefinitely suspend the bill. The bill's suspension is China's biggest political retreat under President Xi Jinping. Ms. Lam, who took over as Hong Kong's leader in 2017 with the support of Beijing, had vowed to ensure the bill's approval and tried to get it passed on an unusually short timetable, even as hundreds of thousands demonstrated against it last week. Carrie Lam is known for almost never backing down in a fight. As pressure mounted, even some pro-Beijing lawmakers said the measure should be delayed. While the suspension is a victory for Hong Kong protesters, Ms. Lam made it clear on Saturday that the bill was being delayed, not withdrawn outright. City leaders hope that delaying the legislation will cool public anger, but leading opposition figures and protesters say that is wishful thinking. Reporting was contributed by Michael Ives, Tiffany May, Catherine Lee, Daniel Victor, Javier Hernandez, Russell Goldman, Gillian Wong and Jennifer Jett.